Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Sony Open Initial Research Show. Hopefully you had a very positive weekend, followed in my footsteps. Mine was looking to be super duper fantastic. But the moral of the story is Jon Rahm is pretty good at golf, just in case you weren't aware. If you remember from last week, I was very high on Colin Morikawa. He played well all weekend and then stumbled coming home today on the back nine. I opened the door for the number one player in my rankings last week in Jon Rahm. So anytime you have the top three finishers in the same lineup, it's going to be a pretty good weekend, as I had and was making suggestions to you all last Wednesday in lineups with Rahm and Morikawa and Homa. So that lineup was always going to be capped. However, I was very high on Adams Vincent. He finishes next to last. Hopefully Xander Schauffele didn't burn you too bad. I was not aware of his withdrawal during the Pro-Am until after the show Wednesday evening. Sat in front of the computer all Thursday morning trying to figure out if he was going to play. Decided to fire him up, and then withdrawals in the middle of round two, which burned a few of the lineups. But overall, a very successful week for me, both in terms of week-long and Showdown content, which brings me to two shout-outs that I need to give out that I know of. And if you have a winner that I don't mention, by all means put it in chat or get at me at social media. Would love to shout out any winners from the community. But first off, congratulations to James from Twitch chat. He continues his solid run of success in Showdown content. He finishes in the top 100 in the big weekend golf contest. But the biggest winner this week from the community is Mama Call. Had a fantastic lineup, finishing inside the top 50 in one of the week-long contests. Tom Hoagie, Max Homa, Morikawa, Rahm had all of those players in her lineup. So a big congratulations to Mama Call for a very successful weekend. And as I mentioned before, if you have a big winner, whether it is in wagers or in DFS, please put it in chat or let me know via social media. Would love to be able to shout you out at the beginning of the week, any big winners that we have from the community in the prior week. But we try to keep the momentum going for the first full field event in the 2023 calendar year for the Sony Open. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is an amazing resource. Look, there's a lot of great tools out there, a lot of great content, articles, everything. I simply believe that Fantasy National is the best value for your money. It allows me to do what I do. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I post a lot of my research that I find throughout the week. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards for the week's tournament. Xander Schauffele ended up killing both of the parlays that I had going, so that hurt the week in terms of profit, but such is life when you get into this line of work. But if you want to see my betting cards week after week, those are over at Twitter, and then Instagram and Twitter is where I post a summary of the research that I do. But if you want to see the full in-depth math nerd in his element, I am live every Monday and Tuesday morning over on Twitch, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We do a number of things over there. It's much more laid back. I have a little bit of music going. I assess and critique myself from the prior week, so I'm definitely going to be doing that for the Tournament of Champions, and then starting the research towards the Sony Open and Waialae. I've done a little bit of that already. I might show at the end of the show tonight if I remember, so put that in chat if you would like to see a little bit of that research up front. But if you're interested in seeing all of that, then give me a follow at Twitch. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Again, I want to hear from you. How was your week? What kind of lineups did you end up playing? Did you go with a stars and scrubs approach? Did you try to find a balanced team that wasn't too terribly chalky? How much did Xander hurt you? Did you avoid him? What are you looking forward to for the Sony? What major storylines do you think will develop throughout the week? All that good stuff. So let's try to continue our winning momentum to start 2023. Let's do our initial research for the 2023 Sony Open. And we are going to start over at GCSAA, as we always do on a Sunday evening. We are at Waialae Country Club. This event has hosted the Sony Open since its inception in 1965. We are in Honolulu, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. Waialae, most famous for the W palm trees on the 16th hole, 16th for the tournament. They actually flip nines for members, but Waialae most famously known for the W palm trees on the approach to the 16th green. Waialae is a par 70 setup at just over 7,000 yards, so very short course. The stimp listed 11 to 12, so I imagine if Kapalua has had a very dry year, then my guess is Oahu has as well, and Waialae Country Club, although there are no notes or specific notes regarding that. So I will be curious tomorrow over at Twitch when I assess and critique the performance for the Tournament of Champions, how the green speeds read, all of that stuff. So these greens are very similar to Kapalua, which we'll obviously get into throughout the show. But the stimp is listed at 11 to 12. That would put it more in the fast range as opposed to average. The average green size here is 7,100 square feet, so not nearly the size of, or the enormous size like Kapalua, but certainly still larger than the average tour size green. I heard on broadcast today actually that the average green size has now been shrunk to 5,500 square feet. I've always said 6,000, so somewhere in there is the average square footage for the PGA Tour. So still larger than average green sizes, quite a bit of fairway, lots of rough, as opposed to Kapalua where there was just as much acreage of fairway as there was rough. Not the case here. These fairways are somewhat wide, sure, but a lot of rough and a lot of area you can get into trouble here. 4 water hazards in play that come into play on 5 holes. Again, another difference from Kapalua, where Kapalua had no water on the course, no holes with water in play. Waialae has 5. We are on Bermuda grass throughout the entirety of the course, just like at Kapalua. So greens are Bermuda, fairways, rough, everything being Bermuda grass. And that is really all there is in terms of Waialae in a GCSAA tournament fact sheet standpoint. The original architect of Waialae is Seth Rayner, renovated by such people as Robert Trent Jones, Tom Doak, but nothing to do with architects in terms of Fantasy National Filter. So again, the main sticking points for Waialae is a shorter course. It is a par 70, so it is a medium length par 70, but overall a shorter course. So we will be looking at less than 7,200 yard courses. Bigger than tour average greens and Bermuda throughout the majority of the course. So with that, let's go ahead and move on over to Fantasy National. And if you attended on Friday evening for the Friday Night Chill stream, where we did a lot of the lineup constructions for weekend golf and Showdown and whatnot, we actually looked a little bit at the field, since Fantasy National had loaded the field for the Sony by that time. So this might be review for those who joined on Friday evening, but quite a few players that played at Kapalua have at least committed to playing at YLI, at least early on in the week. Now, things could change, obviously. We haven't had the withdrawals yet and anything to that effect, but Sung Jae, Keegan, Tom Kim, Brian Harmon, Hideki, Corey Connors, there's 6 already. Billy Horschel makes 7. Russell Henley, Tom Hoagie, that's 9. Jordan Spieth makes 10. So already more than 25% of the field from Kapalua coming over to YLI. I see JJ Spawn down here as well. Adams Vinson. Might be one more. But a good chunk of the players from Kapalua are coming to YLI, and that's just great for the PGA Tour. So the Sony, with a solid field, at least committed to start the week. You see the filters that I have set here for all of calendar year 2022. So your top performers in 2022 that have committed to playing YLI so far: Sung Jae is your number 1 player. Keegan, Tom Kim, Brian Harmon, and Hideki round out the top 5. Corey Connors, Denny McCarthy, Billy Horschel, Keith Mitchell, and Taylor Montgomery round out the top 10. But before we get too much further, let's take a look at YLI from a scorecard and graphical view. So we move to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. First thing I like to do when examining a scorecard is look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes and figure out where par is. So the 9th, a little bit over par. 10th is still over par. You have to get to the 11th most difficult hole where par stands. Now that would generally tell you that the course plays more on the difficult end. That is certainly not the case here. We see now the 13th, very tough hole, plays to a quarter of a shot over par, but you very quickly start approaching the 10ths, 1/10, 1300ths, and so on. Whereas at the opposite end of the spectrum, the 2 par 5s here at YLI, I mean, a 6.5% eagle rate, that is astronomical. Plays to essentially a long par 4. It plays to 2/3 of a shot under par. And then the finishing 18th plays to more than a half a shot under par. So 2 very, very easy holes will very quickly mitigate the difficulty of these toughest 3, 4, maybe even 5 holes. And there are still some easier holes to be had as well. 1600ths, just a shade under 1/10, so on. So 2 very, very scoreable holes knock out the 1 very difficult hole, and then a lot of it plays to slightly under par. The 2 par 5s, again, both very, very short, 506 yards on the front 9, 551 on the back. The par 3s, you've got 176. You do have a long par 3 at 204, 194, and 194. So a little bit of length here in the par threes. That is where the majority of the length of the course will come in, is in those par threes. We move down to the strokes gained by shot type. And for your top 10 finishers, you see a lot of putting here, followed by approach. And that is leading to almost an even distribution between ball striking and short game. Ball striking slightly higher due to the fact that off the tee is pretty substantially more important for around the green in terms of players that finish in the top 10. Moving up the leaderboard to the top fives, approach really does start to try and catch putting, with off the tee still holding a pretty significant advantage over around the green. And then for your winners, putting really takes off, to be expected. If you're going to win the tournament, you're making a lot of putts. But the overarching idea or sentiment that you need to take away from this is that around the green is just not that big of a deal here. It's a short course, so if you are having to rely around the green, that means more than likely you're scrambling, and this course is not difficult. So scrambling puts you behind even further, as opposed to having to scramble on a difficult course where a lot of players are scrambling. Not a lot of players will need to scramble here. So don't be too swayed by the fact that the short game graph slightly outweighs the ball striking. A lot of this is in the putting. So it is still somewhat a ball striker's course, but certainly putting is heavily influenced here at Waialae. So we'll move this back towards the top 10s. We move down to strokes gained by hole by par. You see the two par 5s. Even though there are only two par 5s, they are the leading strokes gained by hole by par. But the par 4s are pretty darn close. So again, it looks like the par 5s have a fairly significant advantage. Don't overlook your y-axis here. The par 4s are only, maybe 400ths behind the par 5s. So not a whole lot there. And then about the same level of distance between the 4s and the par 4s and par 3s for the top 10 finishers. We move to the top 5s. More of the same. Par 4s do kind of start gaining a little bit, but where you see them catch up is in the winners. You see the winners really, really play the par 4s well here. I mean, really, they play the par 3s pretty darn well. You just have to score on these par 5s, and that's why those strokes gained numbers are so high. Again, emphasizing a 6.5% eagle rate, a 3.5% eagle rate, 2/3 and 1/2 of a shot under par. Big numbers, or big amounts of birdies and eagles on those two holes. But another course where par 4s are going to be pretty heavily influenced. Hole composition. You have 3 par 3s that run from 175 to 200. We saw this one measured to 176, and then 2 at 194. I believe 194. Off to a great start this week. And then 1 long par 3 in between 200 and 225. You have a couple of short but not drivable par 4s, just positional style tee shots, forced layups, if you will. 2 from 350 to 400, then an equal amount of par 5s from 400 to 450 and 450 to 5, and then the 2 par 5s, 1 very short and 1 probably medium length par 5. The approach shot distribution. Majority of approach shots here come from 150 to 175, followed by 175 to 200, which might seem a bit odd considering the lack of length of this course. That's just to emphasize the fact that this can be a forced layup, a positional style course where you don't hit driver off every par 4 on the tee box. There are a lot of places where you'll take a fairway metal or even an iron to make sure you are on the proper side of the fairway to attack a green, etc., etc. So the majority of approach shots come from 150 to 175 and 175 to 200. There are a fair amount of 125 to 150s as well. We'll take a slight look at proximity tonight, but as usual, we'll really dig into this tomorrow on the Data Dive show. To emphasize my point about the ease of the tournament, you can see the historic cut line. Now you can see the historic cut line, apologies, has gradually dropped throughout the years. You had one spike in 2020 where it moved to +2, but last year the cut was at -4. That is extremely easy. My guess is it's going to hover around the -2 area, maybe -1, which certainly is on the easier end of average. And again, to emphasize the ease of the course, birdies at almost 20% here. Eagles are just a bit under 100th, but 15% bogeys and about 12 thousandths or 100th of a double. But you stack the doubles on the bogeys, it still is not going to equal the birdies. So overall, it does play too easy for the most part. Interesting thing here with YLI, even though there is a lot of acreage of fairway, the fairways aren't necessarily the easiest to hit. Now, there are some forced layups here, but some guys choose to attack dog legs and whatnot and don't care about being in the rough. Generally, the rough is pretty short here, although last year they had let it grow out and it made it a little bit more difficult. But generally speaking, the rough is short, not very penal here. Green and regulation percentage, slightly higher than the tour average, even though these greens are a lot bigger. And then players are much more successful scrambling here than the average tour event as well. 3 putts per round, slightly less. As we saw at Kapalua, it was a big factor, especially if players had never been there before or were not dialed in with their proximity. 3 putts, and then I've even seen a couple of 4 putts this weekend can happen. Not the case really here at YLI. Less than 50% 3 putts. Driving distance, slightly higher than the tour average, and that is mainly the guys that are tackling the par 5s and the dog legs, because there are a couple, I can think of about 3 forced layups off these tees. So different ways to get around here at YLI. You don't have to have distance to succeed. But that doesn't mean that the big hitters can't win. Justin Thomas has won here. Hideki has won here. But shorter players like Kevin Na have also won here. So multiple ways to get around YLI. And then finally, proximity. A little bit closer proximity than the average tour event by about, 2/3 of a foot. So almost field average. Or tour average, I should say. And then birdie putts, looks like the majority come from 25 plus, at least in terms of relation to the average tour event. So maybe something to look at. Again, more stats that I will be interested to see the putting, and if indeed the 0 to 5 feet ended up being a big factor. Like we looked at last Monday for Kapalua. But there's a look at YLI in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. So So we'll move back over to the player page view. We know that we are on Bermuda, and we're going to take a very, very quick look over here at the historic conditions. And again, the last 2 years, every single round here has been easy. If the wind picks up, it can get difficult. It can. Plays, average to difficult, but majority of the time, as you can see, generally plays easy. The biggest thing I want to look at is green speeds. That's what I thought. Last year they did speed them up a little bit. They might indeed have them sped up again because there were a lot of good reviews from the players and spectators enjoying the fast greens, because every other year had been average speed, as you can see here. So they might keep it sped up. Not sure, but we've always been on Bermuda. So with that, I'm going to look at just average speed Bermuda for the moment, just in case last year was an outlier. And it doesn't look like there's going to be enough rounds to really make this significant. But if you want to get an idea of specifically the best putters on average speed Bermuda greens, at least in 2022, those players were Matt Kuchar, who's also a former winner here, Kelly Kraft, Troy Merritt, Brian Harmon, Brendan Todd, Doc Redman, Aaron Baddeley, Richie Werenski, Billy Horschel, and Ben Taylor. If I include fast and make this a fast and average Bermuda green filter, you can see you get a lot more rounds, as majority of greens on the PGA Tour are labeled as fast. Fast and average, your best Bermuda putters are Martin Traynor, Troy Merritt, Matt Kuchar, Tom Kim, Brendan Todd, Hideki, Richie Werenski, Ben Griffin, Ben Taylor, and Denny McCarthy. So you have a little bit of overlap here. Certainly Matt Kuchar, number 1 when it was just average, falls to number 3 for fast and average. Troy Merritt was up there, Brendan Todd. But surprisingly, Hideki now in the top 10 for fast and average Bermuda. Tom Kim rising to number 3 in terms of fast and average Bermuda greens. Denny McCarthy generally probably going to be there or close for anything putting related. Kelly Kraft was number 2 for average speed Bermuda greens. He falls just outside the top 10 now. But there's a look at your top putters on fast and average speed Bermuda. Not sure how I'm going to approach putting, considering that every single year up until last year the greens were average, and then they did purposefully speed them up, and they got a lot of rave reviews. So I could absolutely see some fast green speeds this week. So we'll see. We'll see if I, grab any information from others in the industry or whatnot, and see if I can glean any information and relay that on to you. Other things to look at here for Waialae. We know this is a short course, so let's go ahead and look at our top performers in 2022 when a course was short. And those players were Keegan Bradley, Russell Henley, Brian Harmon, JT Poston, Andrew Putnam, Jordan Spieth, Keith Mitchell, Patrick Rogers, Ben Griffin, and Sung Jae. So there's your top 10 performers when a course was short. But again, just like Kapalua, the biggest filter that I'm going to be focusing on this week is easy relative to par. Have not checked Wind Finder. I'll absolutely do that tomorrow. If the wind picks up, it could increase the difficulty here. But I mean, we've seen here at the prior conditions, the past 2 years, every single round was easy in the past 2 years. And the majority of the time it is easy. All the way back to 2016 or so. So I'm going to operate under the assumption it's going to play easy again, unless I see something different, as in, say, wind or whatnot. So your top performers on or in easy rounds in 2022, those players were Tom Kim, Maverick McNeely, Russell Henley, Hideki, Tom Hoge, J.J. Spawn, Andrew Putnam, Will Gordon, Adam Svensson, Cam Davis, Brian Harman, and Taylor Montgomery. Turns into a top 12 with numerous people tied for 9th. But you can already see a lot of overlap here. Tom Kim has been in there for Bermuda putting and now on easy, on the easy filter. Hideki, the same. Anytime a round is easy, Adam Svensson generally plays pretty well, and that's why I was really high on him for Kapalua. Didn't work out. Brian Harman, Taylor Montgomery. So, good amount of overlap already from putting and the easy filter. Last thing I want to do, I will narrow this in to just the fall, but I'm going to grab and see who have been the best iron players. Strokes gained approach, just what I truly believe, and again, just double checking myself to make sure there are no filters. I just believe is the most important statistic on the PGA Tour. So your top strokes gained approach players from the fall, meaning middle of September or the Fortinet Championship forward. Those players are Tom Hoge, Russell Knox, Nick Hardy, Tom Kim, Siwoo Kim, Ben Griffin, Billy Horschel, Mark Hubbard, K.H. Lee, and Brian Harman. So good stuff there. Let's see. A couple of other things we might want to look at. Let's take a look at birdies and bogeys. Why not? You had two very, very high eagle rate holes, 6.5% and 3.5%. So I'm going to look at birdies or better. Again, just my preferred. I don't think eagles alone is going to be justified, but certainly birdies are better. Eagles do happen here. So I'm actually going to put on the easy filter and expand this back out to the full 2022. So your top birdies or better gained players when a round was easy in the entirety of 2022. Those players were Ryan Palmer, Tom Kim, Hideki, Taylor Montgomery, Maverick McNeely, Russell Henley, Tom Hoge, Danny Lee, Emiliano Grillo, and Adam Svensson. So again, a whole lot of overlap here to be expected from when we looked at strokes gained total easy. You're getting your birdies and bunches, and that's what you're going to need to do here at Waialae, just like you did at Kapalua. Not too much more that I want to do here in terms of Fantasy National, at least not tonight. But what I will do, and I'm going to bring this back to the strokes gained page view. Let's go ahead and look at the tournament history. This is the strokes gained total tab, if you will. The past 5 years here at Waialae, your leading strokes gained total player is Corey Connors, and he's only played the event 4 times. He has played this event extremely well, including a tied for third in 2019, a couple other top 15s, and a middling performance all the way back in 2018. Your defending champion, however, is Hideki, who came from 6 shots back, I believe it was, 5 or 6, last year to defeat Russell Henley in a playoff. So Hideki is your defending champion, who's also played this event very, very well. As you can see, the second leading strokes gained total player. Pat Gazier, a former champion. Matt Kuchar in 2019. 2020 was Cameron Smith. He is no longer allowed to participate for going over to live. 2021 was, oh boy, who was 2021? I can't remember that one. It's escaping me. Kevin Na, who's also not allowed to participate for going to live. So 2022, Hideki, Kevin Na, Cameron Smith, Matt Kuchar, Pat Gazier. There are also a few other former champions here in the field this week. Jimmy Walker's a two-time winner of this event way back in 2014 and 2015. Russell Henley won this event in 2013 and then runner-up last year. Justin Thomas has won this event. I believe it's 2017. So as you can tell by the list of players, just a lot of different ways to go about Waialae. You don't have to be a big hitter like Justin Thomas or Hideki. You can do it with precision like a Matt Kuchar, a Webb Simpson, who always seems to perform well here, although last year he didn't. Now we know why, because he had injury issues. But I mean, before last year, look at that form. Nothing worse or nothing outside the top 5. But other players here that tend to play well: Keith Mitchell, 4 for 5. All 4 cuts are a top 25. Chris Kirk is seemingly all or nothing. He's missed the cut twice, but also has a runner-up and a top 10. Brian Stewart, 4 for 5. Russell Knox, 4 for 5. Stuart Sink, Ryan Palmer, Keegan Bradley, 2 top 15s and a miscut the last 3 years. Brendan Steele, 2 top 5s and a miscut. So here's a look at some of the players that play Waialae well at the other end of the spectrum. The guys that for whatever reason have not played this event well. Robert Shreb, 1 for 5. Interesting to see Satoshi Kodaira, even with a T12 last year, third least in terms of strokes gained total. Adam Schenk, 1 for 5. Kevin Tway, 2 for 5. Jim Herman, Tyler Duncan, Jimmy Walker, even though he won in 2014 and 2015, the last 5 years have been a real struggle. Probably makes some sense as he continues to age. Troy Merritt, who popped on quite a few of the filters, has not played well here, so very interesting to see that. JJ Spawn, 0 for his last 3 here at Waialae, coming off a pretty darn good Tournament of Champions, so interesting to see. But there's a look at some of the players who have not performed well here at Waialae. So that's going to do it for the Fantasy National portion of the show tonight. Coming straight from the Tournament History tab, or the Strokes Gained Total, let's go ahead and move on over to Microsoft Excel and what I deem the early look file or whatnot. But this is taking that same strokes gained total number. Well, shoot. The page was getting cut off. So I'll transition one more time. It's taking this number here and applying it straight into these specific stats. So I've went ahead and filtered out any player that has only played it once. I do want to see players who have consistently played Waialae, what they have been good at and whatnot. And you can see here, Corey Connors, the leading strokes gained total player with an average finish of 16th. He's actually putt very well here. Again, leading credence to the graphs that we saw at the beginning of the show, that putting is just a big factor here. Same for Webb Simpson. Hideki has been doing it more with ball striking. Hideki is never going to be a very good putter, but to see him at just -0.3 is solid by Hideki standards. Billy Horschel doing Billy Horschel things on Bermuda greens, putting them very well. Svensson, good combination of irons and putting. Ryan Palmer was up there in terms of strokes gained total. Patton Kizzire, former champion, doing it a lot with putting. So you can see already a pattern start to form. The best performers here generally putt these greens very well. Very, very well. And they generally putt Bermuda, particularly average and fast Bermuda well. Hideki, Adam Svensson, Keith Mitchell, I believe, was up there. Brendan Todd's always going to be up there for putting. Denny McCarthy generally is as well, although he hadn't played this event terribly strong, it doesn't look like. So that's interesting to note. So there you go. There's a look at some of the top performers and where their strokes gained are. We'll move across the various tabs. Driving-wise, again, distance, I mean, it can help, but certainly isn't needed. Brendan Todd has played this event well. He's never going to be long off the tee. Same for Brian Stewart, who's 4 for 5. Webb Simpson's even positive in terms of distance here. Adam Svensson is not. Stuart Sink's positive in terms of distance. So lots of different ways to get around here. Fairways, again, these have been traditionally harder to hit, especially lately, because I don't think players generally mind playing out of the rough. The rough is usually pretty short here, so not too penal. And then greens-wise, with these greens being so large, not sure how much they're going to play too much of a factor, although your leaders have some pretty big numbers here. So we'll take a look at that tomorrow as well. But again, just looking at the ease of the course, I mean, all of these birdies gained, especially against their bogeys. Now, Billy Horschel seems to be one of the outliers. He has more bogeys avoided than birdies gained, but you see Corey Connors higher in birdies, Webb Simpson higher in birdies, Hideki slightly higher in bogeys, but pretty darn close. Stuart Sink birdies, Ryan Palmer birdies, Adam Scott birdies. So majority of it looks to be in terms of birdies. In fact, I'll just sort on all of the players that have played it multiple times and averaged a top 40 or better finish. This is an average of 1.8 versus a 1.8, so it's actually pretty darn close. Okay, so you do have a couple of negatives here that are probably weighing down the birdies gained, but a lot of heavy green up at the top versus it looks like it's a pretty steady run of bogeys avoided here that is catching the bogeys avoided up. So, okay. I still think it's birdies gained. Eagles, a decent amount, but that's why I'm going with birdies or better gained instead of looking at eagles separately, even though there are two very good eagle chances here. We move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Again, par 3s seem to be mitigated graphically. The 175 to 200 was the most prevalent in terms of length of par 3. But there doesn't look to be a whole lot here of the players that average a top, we'll do the same top 40. This is an average of a 0.8, whereas look here in the par 4s, I mean, you can see just a huge amount of green. This average is a 3.0. So 3.0 for par 4s and a 0.8 on the par 3s. So just a heavy emphasis on par 4s here. And then just out of curiosity or to complete the thought, par 5s are averaging a 0.5. So even though graphically via Fantasy National, the par 5s were a big factor, there's only 2 of them. So this is leading to what I was thinking, that the par 5s probably are going to be fairly mitigated in terms of importance. There's a lot of emphasis on par fours here. A lot of an emphasis on par fours. Very quickly, we'll move to proximities, see if there's anything that stands out. Let's see. These two ranges were the most prevalent. Boy, there doesn't look to be a whole lot there, does there? Hideki has been good really at every single proximity, but that's doing Hideki things. Quite a bit here in the 100 to 125. Interesting. So there's a look at some of the top performers, at least in the past 5 years, here at YLI and what they have done. I will bring in all the players that have only played it once. Again, I don't like to put a lot of statistical importance to players who only play a tournament one time. Could have been a good week. A whole lot of outliers can happen. But there is that information for you now intermingled with everybody else. But the last thing that I want to bring up for you all, let's take a look at the comparison course spreadsheet. I will zoom in a little bit for you all so that way the Sony should be the focal point, as long as my big goofy bald head doesn't get in the way. We see here, again, strokes gained approach slightly higher than the putting, 2.66 to 2.48. Again, it's just an emphasis on the only reason the putting is so high is just, it's from the winners. But to consistently play well here, you've got to hit your irons. And I mean, this is a pretty low outlier as well. So if you take that out, moves to 2.81. So off the tee, again, higher than the around the green. And you've got some pretty big numbers here in the around the green metrics that will drop this number. So I still look at this as a ball striking course, although putting will dominate for players that win. Move to driving. I mean, you see here, driving distance doesn't matter. And this is, I mean, you take that outlier and it drops precipitously. So distance, not really a big factor. It's looking like greens is the biggest here. But we'll also take a look at YLI versus all of the other full field courses and see if that is indeed a big number. I don't think it is. Eagles, birdies, and bogeys. This Eagles number is actually fairly large. It is an actual fairly big number. So it's just re-emphasizing to me the importance of birdies or better. I mean, look here, that's a big low outlier. I mean, it jumps 2 full tenths when you remove that. So going to be looking at birdies or better throughout the week. Let's see if we can get an early look and see if any particular length of par 3, 4, or 5 matters. Par 3s, still just a 1.22. Again, some more emphasis here. You see 1.22 versus a 5.04. Just an astronomical amount of importance here on the par 4s at the Sony, at YLI. If there's a most important range, sure enough, it does look like it's the 175 to 200. So that's at least promising. But doesn't look to be statistically significant at first look. For the par 4s, again, massive number here. 2 pretty big numbers here. And this, again, there are 5 par 4s that measure to this length and 5 par 4s that measure to this length. So, okay. All right, that's promising to see. And then par 5, just mitigated. Just mitigated. This number is lower than even the par 3s because there's only 2 par 5s on the course. So I just don't see par 5s being a big factor this week. Lastly, we'll take a look at proximity and then look at the course evaluation against other courses. 175 to 200 looks to be a pretty big number there. And that number is extremely low outlier. My goodness. 175 to 200 is going to be a pretty big focal point, it looks like, this week. Okay. All right. So why am I able to say that, that's a big number or whatnot? Now, yes, I made the spreadsheet, all that stuff, but let's look at course evaluation. And this is a way to compare the course that we are at this week, Waialae Country Club, versus other full field courses on the PGA Tour that get used year over year. And I emphasize full field courses because I don't use Kapalua. I don't use, say, Augusta National because it's only about 90 players or so, whereas there are 140 to 50 players at the majority of these other tournaments. So I want to compare at least as consistently as possible like-sized fields. So, for players that finish inside the top 30 or average a top 30, you can see Waialae is about 3% less important than the average full field course. Approach is almost 7% more important. Putting 5% more important, etc., etc. So again, just the emphasis on the approach. And yes, putting, but don't overlook the approach this week. We move over to the driving. Again, distance, not a big factor, and that number will go down from that big outlier. Fairways, good drives. And even greens, it looked like it was the most important, but compared to other full field courses, it's right at average. So not much statistical significance this week in terms of greens and regulation gained. Now this is a huge number, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do much with driver left and driver right avoid. Perhaps it's something I should look into. I might do that tomorrow. But in terms of the metrics that I look at in driving, nothing here signifies that it warrants a lot of attention for Waialae. Sorry, the greens were just getting cut off. There's the greens, just a smidge above course average. Move to eagles and birdies and bogeys. We saw, I mentioned the eagles. That was a pretty big number. 45% more eagles, or eagles gained, more important here. I still have my doubts that it's going to warrant its own consideration. Because if we take off this outlier here for birdies, that number now goes to 14%. So, I mean, birdies or better, absolutely. But I'm not comfortable looking at eagles gained by itself. And maybe that's an overreaction to getting burned at the Tournament of Champions from last year. Very possible. But definitely going to be looking at birdies gained throughout the week. Birdies even more important than bogeys. Again, emphasis on ease of the course. You got to go get the birdies as opposed to avoiding the bogeys. Par threes, pretty darn mitigated, except for the 175 to 200. And even though there's no holes that measure to this length on the scorecard, when they move tees and pins and whatnot, actually looks like par threes, 150 to 175, are also more important compared to the average tour course. But overall, par threes, not important. It is the 175 to 200s that are the factor here. Makes a lot of sense. 3 of the 4 par threes measure to this range on the scorecard. Moving to the par fours, again, we saw these big numbers, 14.5% more important here at Waialae than the average full field course. So we're going to place a heavy emphasis on the par fours here. 400 to 450, 44.5% more important than the average. 450 to 500 is 11.7% more important. So again, 5 par fours that measure in this range, 5 par fours that measure in this range at Waialae. Lots of emphasis on these ranges of par 4s and par 4s in totality. Move to par 5s, very mitigated. 40% less important than the average tour course. There's only 2 of them here. Everybody's seemingly going to score on them. It's not a big factor. And I don't like placing emphasis on one hole. And you can see almost not every course has a par 5 that measures from 0 to 500. So we're not going to do anything with that. Proximities. Look at that. Prox total. Actually 28% more important. I thought that was a fairly big number. And that number is so almost double in importance in these 2 ranges of proximity. 125 to 150 and 175 to 200 versus the average tour course. Okay. It'll be interesting to see when we go through the leaderboards tomorrow night in the Data Dive show if that indeed shows up for high-end leaderboard success. So I'll be interested to see that. But that is going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. I will take you back to the player performance. Again, these numbers are specifically here at Waialae. That might be a touch too big. You might want to see a few more players. There you go. So Lucas Glover has played this event 1 time in the past 5 years. He finished 5th. Those were his stats. So on and so forth. Sorted by average finish. So this is their performance specifically at Waialae. But thank you for tuning in and watching the show tonight. Really do appreciate all the support, the comments, subscribes, likes, all of that. In the comments, let me know how this weekend went. Would love to be able to shout some more of the community out tomorrow. Reminder for schedule, 10:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow over at Twitch. We're going to be doing the Tournament of Champions critique, if you will, and then doing some Sony research tomorrow night, the Data Dive show. Tuesday morning, we'll be back on Twitch doing some more research. Then Wednesday will be the DFS Tactics. Friday evening, the Friday Night Chill stream, which is where I do a lot of the Showdown content, that's going to move to 9 p.m. Eastern. I have been going live at 8. I'm going to move it back to 9 p.m. One, they're in Hawaii, so it takes a little while longer for those rounds to get completed. But also Friday happens to be Mama Call's birthday, so definitely going to be celebrating that before going live. So Friday, the Friday Night Chill stream will be at 9 p.m. Eastern. But the usual schedule throughout this week otherwise. Thanks again for tuning in and watching. It's always appreciated. For all of the wagers that you made this past week for the Tournament of Champions, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week at the Tournament of Champions, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.